Alrighty, we are back for another week and another episode of this exceptionally irresistible show. Super, super exciting, super fun, and the feedback has just been incredible. So we really appreciate everybody who's showing up. Baruch, how are you doing this week?
So far, so good. It's been a bit of an insane week, but Wednesdays are one of my favorite days. It's always my busiest day, but I'm just excited to be here, especially on this show with you and with our very special surprise guest. I've
I
been looking
know
forward to this one for a while. So,
this is super exciting, and I mean, like, it really matches up, and like, we spoke about earlier today in our actual show about you know having a life plan. We have this life plan, and most people plan for their life because nobody wants to fail, so we always fail to plan. We just don't plan to fail. But then like, there's the expression of man laughs, and I mean, man plans and God laughs, right? So how do we reconcile the two, and how
right.
how does this work out? Like, how do we make that happen? And that was really the whole discussion that we had on the show. And then you introduced us to this awesome guest, and you said this would be great to have her on. So what do you say? Should we bring her on?
Let's bring her on.
Alrighty. So there she
Hi.
is. This is Chelsea.
What's up,
Hello,
y'all?
Chelsea.
Hey, Chelsea.
Now we know
So,
where
How
you're
are
from.
you? Right? I just introduced myself and my state all at the same time.
That's awesome. Let's jump straight into the little official bio so everybody knows who you are, and then we're going to get to the show, the exciting part. So, Chelsea Verrette is a school leader and educator who uses her experience to partner with education and education-related businesses in professional development, strategy and operations, and telling their story. As an assistant director, Chelsea saw that she could multiply her impact on learners and educators in a meaningful way. Then came 2020. This has carried her over to her current role as a success coach, where she helps individuals to ruin their life and challenge the status quo in their own lives and to live outside the boxes that others have created for them. Chelsea, we're talking all about life plans. And when we first connected and you shared your story with me, it was kind of very much that idea of you can plan all you want, but other things are going to happen and you kind of have to adapt. So I'm excited to have you speak to us about this. But before we get into that official topic, why don't you tell us a little bit more about who you are and what you're all about?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm an educator, always have been, always will be. I'm like a third generation educator. Like, I don't know that there's anything else that I could do if I didn't do that. And so, my favorite field of education is early education. That's kind of where I started. My degree is child development. I really prefer humans who are 8 and younger. And then I deal with anyone who's older than that because I want to be kind to the rest of the world. But really, if you're 8 and younger, you're my people. So that's kind of where I did my like 16 years of my career, and I taught and did assistant directing and then directing and then founding and all these types of things. And then 2020 happened, and the school that I had been recruited to run shut down. And I, which like so many other people was just like, I mean, okay. So I had some things that I was doing on the side. So I just kind of jumped into those. So now I live on
Right.
outside of the school walls, still doing a lot of education stuff. But yeah, I mean, that's me. We all lived through it. It's 2022, not 2020, as I was reminded yesterday. We've had a whole 2 years since then. It's crazy.
oh my gosh, yeah, so
Right.
true.
It's funny. I love how
So
you say, you're an educator versus being a teacher. This is something that I've talked about extensively, and Yermi and I talked about this on one of our shows. There's a difference between an educator and a teacher. But it's interesting that you prefer the younger grades, whereas I can only work with higher functioning, more mature students or adults. So it's interesting that everybody has their place in the field of education.
I mean, you say higher functioning and more mature as if the 4-year-old is not higher functioning and more mature than the 12-year-old. I'm just throwing it out there. I'm just saying. Or the 33-year-old. Like, this is what I'm
Very
saying.
true.
Just leave that there.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, just yesterday, I was having a little conversation on the comments in on a LinkedIn post, and we were just talking, and it turned out that like emotional intelligence that's being thrown around a lot lately, and we were just saying like, but maybe it's just really a maturity level. I mean, like these older individuals who are acting like a bunch of children, you know. And my very beginning was also an educator for children, and I prefer the middle ages. So it's funny, we have young, you know, old, middle, you know, we have it all represented here. I prefer the middle ages. I like those ages. And I was just saying, like, sometimes I'm dealing with business owners and different business professionals, and I think to myself, wow, like my middle school, like my middle aged kids, you know, we're acting almost the same way. So is this like a high school? Like, what is this? Like, you know?
Listen, I don't work with students anymore. I only work with adults at this point in my career, for better or for worse. And I got to tell you, I use all the classroom management skills that I learned while teaching in my meetings with grown adults.
Oh, yeah.
So I got all the skills that I need.
That is so true. I was writing a paper about like facilitating meetings for different things, and most of the paper was just like basic etiquette that we do in schools, like we do with kids, you know. And I said sometimes you just have to manage that, you know, that behavior and that attitude and stuff like that. So
there is so much behavior management that happens when working with adults. I learned it all when working with 4-year-olds, but you know, it does the same thing.
Absolutely.
Just don't tell the adult they don't like that.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Secrets out.
So I would like to just really jump into the conversation right away, because I think there's a lot of connection. It's funny that we have, you know, educators talking about this particular topic, which is the, you know, we talk a lot about Exceptionally Irresistible, but we're talking about life plans. And in our show, we were talking about how life just throws at us curveballs. There's a lot of things that we don't expect in life. We don't know that things are going to come up, and there it is. And you know, sometimes we have all these like fantastic plans. I mean, I had my whole decade planned out. Like I knew what I was doing for a decade, and then all of a sudden there's like 2020 and like, hello, how are you? You know, and that was kind of like how that worked out. And but then, so how like what is it that, as an educator, when you see it, right? And you're saying that you worked with children, you worked with you're working with adults, and you're seeing patterns, right? How can we set up, I think the question really is, how do we set up our kids, younger, you know, the younger kids who eventually will become adults? If you could speak to the adult version of these younger kids, what is it that you would hope for, or I guess change, or how do you set them up, you know, to be realistic in life plans, I think?
Yeah. So my okay, so it's two-sided. Okay, we're just gonna go there. First side is I was very much we have to set these goals and time frames, and we're gonna do these things. And the beauty of that is you kind of have something to shoot for. The downside of that is I ended up reaching all of my life goals by the time I was like 23.
Wow.
So then I was like, and I'm done, you know? So then you had to just, then it was like, well, then what? And that was a really weird time, because they tell you that you're supposed to reach your goals, but they don't say like what happens when you do that. And then do you put new goals or those types of things? So I think that's one side of it. If you have to always do it way, 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 way bigger than you think that you need to do it. And then the other side of that is like, always be ready to burn it down. I mean, I got in a place that everything was had to fit exactly in a certain way. And I didn't like for things to be shifted or to move too much. And so, which is funny because I worked in early education where nothing really can be planned, but it's fine. And so I think I was very often like, it's got to look exactly like this. And if it doesn't look like this, then that's failing. And we have to make sure that this happens and this happens and this happens. And I was killing myself. Like I was shooting myself in the foot and putting myself in this terrible box and expectations and perceptions and et cetera. And so I think it's the dual-sided answer would be always plan and think way bigger than you think, like way bigger than you think you're going to need. And then also just be ready to kind of burn it down and start over. There is no, this has to stand forever. Or if you come out of the gate and decide that you're going to be an educator, and then did I hear one of you were saying in the podcast from this morning, like you were planning to be something and then you ended up a teacher. Who was that? Was that one of you?
I was planning on going into movies and noveling, and I ended up in education.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that can be a really hard thing is if they're like, plan your future, and then you plan it, and then you're kind of doing it, and you're like, I don't know that I like this, but you don't want to change it because this was your plan. Like, you got to be ready and able and confident enough to kind of burn that down and then make that shift. Otherwise, like, you don't know what it could be like over there. Why not? Like, what could go wrong? That's my whole, that's all the advice I got.
Yeah. What could go wrong? So here's a question. One of the questions I was going to ask you is, how does a person come up with the courage or the strength to make that shift? But you already answered that. But the question that I wanted to ask is there when a person is going big or they've reached their goals and now they have to kind of burn everything down and start something new, is there certain common denominators that they should be looking for? Is there a way of kind of having an idea of, oh, this should be my next move? Because, we talk about pivoting, and pivoting is generally you're shifting a little bit, but you're staying within the same area. Like for me to go from teaching in education into coaching, they're very similar. Essentially, as an educator, I'm coaching students all day long. But for other people, you might be making a full shift. So curiously, I would love to hear your thoughts as to how do you make that shift? How do you make the pivot? How do you gain the courage to just burn those bridges and move into something else? Is it completely different, or does it stay kind of more within the same realm, the same sphere?
I mean, okay. So first I'm going to address the burn the bridges thing. So I heard this like theory about this whole, never burn a bridge concept. But and they were painting this picture, right? So if you imagine yourself and you think of all of the people or businesses or whatever that you don't want to burn a bridge with, but you don't really want to cross the bridge. You don't want to maintain it. You just don't want to burn it. Well, they're not holding up their side of the bridge. So now you imagine yourself with all of these like one-sided bridges that you're having to hold up. So how much energy and, of yourself are you putting into these one-sided bridges? Because bridges are meant to be supported from two sides. And that really kind of shook my thinking on this whole don't burn that bridge thing. It's like, well, maybe you do burn that bridge or just let it fall. Because what if I'm putting my energy into holding up something that's completely one-sided and I may never need that again? Or if by the time I need that bridge, the bridge is old and crickety and I need to build a new one. So, so that kind of shook up that, made me think of it when you said that. But I think it can go either way. And it really depends on what your interest is, because hopefully in some way your passion and your interest is guiding what you're doing, whatever that is, right? So when I was in early education, when I was teaching in the classroom, I loved engaging with the students and trying something different and, helping and guiding the parents and these aspects that I loved. Well, those same aspects transitioned into assistant directing. because I was still getting to, now instead of guiding and teaching the students, I was getting to guide and teach the staff, and et cetera, et cetera. And then I took some of those pieces and took them into directing. And then a lot of the pieces that I took from directing, like professional development and doing accreditation studies in other schools and working with other professionals and whatever, then I carried those into, you know, the coaching and stuff that I'm doing now and the consulting. And so I think at the same time, though, mine have kind of seemed to have made sense in how they kind of transition. Yeah. But at the very same time, I could see myself saying, I really like growth and development and working with other professionals and, you know, challenging norms. I'm going to burn all that down. I no longer want to work in any of this. And I'm going to go do like a CEO for a nonprofit, because I'm taking my same core pieces with me. And it's just the title that kind of shifts. So I think the answer could really be yes and no.
I know.
Like, as long as you're taking those core pieces with you, the day-to-day of the job is really less relevant, or the title is less relevant if you're fueled from the same fire.
Yeah. I mean, it's really amazing. And I just want to bring up this comment by Rick Davis, because it's really, really powerful what he's saying, that sometimes if you don't burn those bridges, you know, those enemies could come and cross. You know, it's kind of like that. I mean, the way I'm interpreting it is that I guess like sort of like the things that I don't want from my past sort of coming and following me. Maybe it's lessons, maybe it's mistakes, maybe it doesn't necessarily mean people or whatever, but you know, and I think, I just see he just followed up, I guess. Here's the question, is that what is our enemy that we don't want to cross the bridge? Yeah. So I the way I interpret it is mostly like past mistakes or past experiences, or past, doesn't always necessarily have to be the people or whatever. That's how I'm also understanding also what you're sharing, Chelsea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think it's important also to, you know, for myself, like limiting the people who have access to you, like quick access to you. That's a limited thing. And if you're holding up all of these bridges and these access points for all of these people who are really not playing an important or productive role in your life, like, you don't need that many people having access to you like that. Just let the bridges fall. You don't need it.
Couldn't agree more. Right. Totally agreed. Yeah.
Wow.
And you know, Baruch, I just to like remind the guests, those who listen to the podcast, you know, how you were saying your journey, how you went from, you know, planning to be this producer / you know, novelist and everything, and then falling into education. And I remember sort of having the same idea, and I think we even spoken on the podcast, where I also had these ideas of where I wanted to go. And then speaking to Chelsea's point, those goals that we set up for ourselves, right? Which really brings us to that next question of, so we hear a lot. Oh, hold on a second. Sorry, guys. Technical difficulties. We hear a lot about this, you know, this living this ideal life, or living the ideal way, right? I talk a lot about this, visualizing the kind of life that you want to live, right? So I think for me, the way I interpret it, I don't see it as burning a bridge per se. I like to use all my strengths and all my skills and everything that I do, because I believe it's a gift. We're given this gift that, you know, maybe Baruch, you're good with storytelling. So maybe you're that kind of educator who's really just good at storytelling. And if I'm not mistaken, I think on the podcast we shared about this one educator who I helped him find his dream job. And he was a rapper. He was a singer. He was a musician. And he was teaching his lessons through rap, you know. And I told him, if you have this vision for your life, doesn't necessarily fall into, you know, boxes or whatever, but figure out how to live this beautiful life that you set up for yourself. So my question really, I guess, to Chelsea is, how does that fall into play? How does that, like this ideal life, so to speak?
You know, so I posted something about this the other day, about when we go in to make these lists for like our ideal job or our ideal relationship or whatever we're making a list for, right? Say it's your job. Like, I want my salary to be this much. You give it a specific number. I want the location to be this. I need, the team structure to be this. And what if instead of setting up your ideal life as I need to have these bullet points, what if you came at it as I'm looking for these feelings or experiences? So instead of I need to make 300K, it's I want to be able to provide for my family in a way that I feel comfortable and don't have to, be concerned from paycheck to paycheck. Right. So you're shifting from I need to make this very boxed in amount to I want to feel this way. And maybe you can feel that way with 200K instead of 300K. Right. And so you're allowing for that kind of shift in what your ideal life looks like, dependent upon what you're looking to experience for yourself, instead of saying, I need this very specific thing. And it was the same thing for like relationships, right? Instead of saying, I need someone who has a master's degree, it's I want someone who can have deep intellectual conversations with me, because you can get that with or without a master's degree. So you're looking for that feeling instead of that bullet point. And I think for me, that's a big shift that I've made as I'm kind of, setting up my ideal life or whatever you call it, right? Is what's the feeling that I'm looking for instead of that bullet point. And it's a big shift in thinking and how I'm kind of perceiving what I want to do next.
Wow. That's a very powerful point. That's one of the things that we mentioned I'm always trying to make sure I'm not offending anybody. So I constantly apologize on the podcast. And one of the things I said was, there's no right or wrong way, but like this really just goes to show that some people, that bullet point that's what it is. They want that $1 million, but what you're bringing to light is that feelings and your emotional connection to something is just as valid and just as important. I think that's incredible, because the other thing is, for me, all about exceptional development. To me, exceptional means leveling up, always doing one step more than where you are now, which means there's constant growth. There's constantly going to the next level. And you can feel a feeling, but then still want it more. So you're going to have to do the work to get that feeling again. And so it's this constant drive to, one of the things I mentioned was happiness is in the pursuit of something great. Like when I was in New York, I was pursuing something great, even though I hated it there, but I was pursuing something great. So I was happy. We moved here. I had everything I was pursuing. So I became unhappy, which was really weird. So I had to set up something to pursue so that I would be happy again. And I think that's exactly what you're saying there is that feeling, that emotion. So thank you for that. It's a powerful share.
I think it goes all the way back to what we talked about, the goals at the beginning, when I said, you have to always dream 20 times bigger than you think, because I was in a very similar place when I was 23 and was able to check off all these boxes. I was like, what, and it kind of stagnated. Like, what am I going to do with that? And so it is in the pursuit of whatever you're going after, because, if you're constantly reaching it, you have nothing next, then. And I think that's a thing with feelings is if you set a goal at 200K and then you hit 200K for your salary, then you're like, I'm done. But if you're setting the goal for, I want to feel this feeling of comfortability, you have to make that recurring, and it gives you, you're always going to be kind of chasing that, for lack of a better word.
Love it.
Yeah, I totally agree. And actually, so I'm actually in the middle of writing. I finished writing the book, but now we're in the middle of publishing it. It should be coming from the editor any day now. So we're publishing this book. It's called For the Love of Success. And it really talks very much aligned with what you're saying. I had a dream. Like I knew the kind of wife that I wanted to marry, and I made myself my list, and my list was 4 pages long. The way it works in our culture, in our community, is that you go to a matchmaker and you sort of say, here's what I'm looking for. Here's what I am, it's very much arranged in that kind of sense. And then they start setting you up, and, and that's how this works. But
that actually sounds amazing. I'm just going to jump into that system.
So there's the pros and the cons. There's the pros and the cons. I felt, unfortunately, the cons part of it, where they just looked at me and they look at this like 4-page, they looked at it as if it was a demand list, which it totally wasn't. But anyhow, And they just looked at me and they were trying to coach me through not making lists. And I was just saying, like, look, I did a lot of introspection, I did a lot of internal work, and I just know the kind of person that I am and what's going to work for me, and that's where I'm coming from. And my list was very much aligned with what you're saying, where yes, it was detailed, it was detailed. However, there were explanations to why it was detailed. There was explanations why I wanted this kind of person. And I did leave like a leeway in there to say, okay, she doesn't have to necessarily have red hair. She could be blonde too, kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't matter to me. Like, I don't care about it that much. I'm only giving these specifics in order to kind of like create it into existence, so to speak.
Right. I mean, you have to vision cast in some way.
Yeah.
Like, you have to know what you're like. I think it was you that talked about kind of vision boarding or vision planning, or like allowing to see yourself where you want to be. And I think you have to have some of those details to be able to do that practice.
Absolutely. And I guess like the next question really is that, yes, you have this ideal life, so to speak. You're giving this element of leeway, which, by the way, we will come back to that in a moment. But if you have this sort of like, here's what I want for life and here's the goals that I want to get, you're saying, put up high goals. And I'm totally with you, because everybody told me that woman didn't exist. Everybody told me that woman doesn't exist. The woman doesn't exist. Guess what? Thank God I'm married to her. So she does exist, very much so. But the question is how do we get there? How do we get to this ideal life? We have this picture, we have this idea. Yes, we're causing leeways, which again, we're going to get back to in a moment. But in a practical sense, how do I, instead of sitting on a couch and just visualizing things, but how do I actually make it into action? What is your opinion?
So the first thing that I had to do for me was, and I talked about this a lot when I first got onto LinkedIn and like first started kind of deconstructing my life, as it were, and rebuilding it into what it is now, is that understanding what values and ideals and perspectives I had and kind of listing those out, right? But then also understanding which of those I put there, which of those other people put there, other societies, religion, etc. And then understanding which ones I still wanted. And then taking away the ones that I didn't want. So if society says that I have to be, I have to weigh 120 pounds and whatever, right? I don't know what else society says. I stop listening. But if society says I have that, and that's an ideal that I have in my brain, and I write that down and I really look at it and go, does that align with like me? Do I want that standard, or can I let that one go? And so that was a really huge, and I say it's a constant practice of, okay, cool. Well, I need to be able to afford this type of car. And as I have that thought, I'm really quick about bringing it back and going, okay, now what's bringing that? Is that a standard I put in? Is that a standard someone else put in? And do I want that there? So really that process has kind of been my step-by-step to getting me from, where I was to where I'm going. And I think ideal can be misleading because it sounds like a destination that you get and then you stay. But the reality is it's just a constant construction zone of, whatever's going on. So that was my most practical, like, piece of advice that I use daily on so many things is, why are you chasing that? Do you want to chase that? Or is someone else telling you to chase that? Or do you even like that? Like, why do you even, your clothes wouldn't fit you if you weighed 120 pounds. Like, you'd have to buy new jeans. We don't want that. We don't want it.
Yeah. I love the reflection part. I love how you're doing that reflection part. Because the funny thing is that this was a 2-part question. So the second part is like what kind of person do you have to be in order to achieve your ideal life? So you kind of put the two answers into one. I love how you sat down, you reflected, you wrote down, here are ideals, right? And then you challenge your ideals.
Yeah.
You challenge them. This being 120 pounds, who's talking? What voice am I hearing in my head? Is it just the media or, Hollywood or whatever? or is it really Chelsea? Chelsea just wants to be healthy, and Chelsea thinks that 120 pounds is healthy. I don't know.
It can be very surprising. There are things that, and it's a muscle that I've built over the past 2 years now, right? So I can do it pretty quickly on my own. But when I first started doing it, my coach was doing it with me. And she helped me kind of write those things down and then walk me through the process. But now there are times when something pops up, like when I got a different car from the one that I had. And I was like, okay, I want one that has this, 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 and this. And then I was like, do I want those things? I mean, that's probably society. I probably don't need those things. And I was like, no, I want those things. And so, I kept those. So there are times when I think that's probably just society telling me that. But no, I actually do want that. And so I keep it, even though it aligns with society. So it's not all about like rebellion and anarchy, because there are things you're going to choose to do that do align with society. But the biggest question is, does it align with you? And I think what type of person you need to be is a type of person that understands, what do you look like when you're aligned? Because you can't align anything else to you if you don't understand like your own alignment. And I think that's probably the type of person that you would have to be, or that I've had to be, to kind of go through this process.
Love that.
I'm just waiting for the delay on my computer to catch me up so I can actually speak without interrupting somebody. There is so much great stuff there. I love it. Especially those 3 questions that you posed and that you do pose to yourself. I wrote those. I'm taking notes. That's why when I'm looking off screen, I'm taking notes. It's interesting because it reminded me of like my dating experience where, again, I came with a list and I actually had the matchmaker say, rewrite your list, because I wrote a list that was very comical and funny, because that's what I wanted. They said, no, nobody's going to accept this. Rewrite it to our standards. So that's what I did. I still wrote it to what I wanted, but based on what would be accepted. And then what ended up happening is because I ended up dating 4 people plus my wife. And with each of those 4 people, something else left my list. And I learned something from it about myself. And then when I met my wife, when I was no longer looking for that list, I was looking for somebody who would bring out that emotion and that feeling and share experiences with. That ended up being Shayna, who is now my wife. And she was everything on that list that I had previously gotten rid of. So that's kind of it's burning and bringing. But there was something else there that you mentioned that I wanted to speak to for a second, but I completely forgot what it was. But this is awesome.
No, while you're thinking of it, if it ever comes back to you, I think what you said there is important, in that you can't. I'm not trying to like demonize lists, right? I mean, you have to start somewhere, and the beauty of that is, you can go, yeah, that was on my list, but I experienced that. I don't want to keep it. You thought that this would have that emotion, or that you would like that emotion, and then you actually don't want that emotion. And so you take it away. And so that constant ability to be flexible and just understand that you are a human with changing ideals and perspectives every day, and you're supposed to be, is a huge piece of it. And then Rick asked, is alignment related to our purpose? Can I answer that? My thought on that?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, I was going to bring it up.
Yeah, so I think it can be, but I don't think that it also always is, because your alignment, to me, my alignment for me, when I talk about alignment, means I know when I feel safe and secure, and that I'm working in something that I know I'm bringing value to others and to myself. And so if I have something that's in my life and I'm feeling like extra anxiety, or, I'm having these behaviors that are showing me that something's not quite right, maybe a relationship, maybe money that I'm spending on something, maybe a way that I handled something, etc., then I use that as an indicator that something's kind of off. And so I think my alignment for myself fuels me to be able to go after my purpose, but my alignment is not my purpose. Does that make sense? I feel like
no, absolutely.
Kind of had lots of pieces, but that's how I see it.
That's deep. I love that.
It's
going to take me a couple days to process. Wow. I remembered what I was going to say though, because it has to do with the whole ideals and values thing. I had a session with one of my counselors because processing a lot, or not processing, which has been the problem.
Yeah.
But I've been going through a lot of change. So I had a
Process.
session with one of my counselors, and one of the things that he, yeah, one of the things he said though was, it's funny because I was not expecting this. He said something about guilt, which was absolutely amazing. But then he said that because I'm so passionate about helping others, and I've built my life around helping others, whether it's family, whether it's friends, whether it's community, whatever it is, I'm always thinking about and focusing on others and helping them to get to where they need to be. And he said, who are you? Do you even know who you are? And that it took me a second, because it was actually Jeremy and I were speaking to somebody else together, and he asked me the same thing, and I shut down for a good minute or so. I couldn't come up with an answer. So when my counselor brings it up again to me, so now he's going to have me on this journey this year of, well, identifying who am I really, because that's one of those things where being there for others and empowering others, it is one of those ideals and one of those values that I truly believe is internal, and it is part of who I am.
Sure.
But because of outside influences, it has become, so to speak, dangerous. So even those things that are our ideals and values, which we think may be coming from elsewhere, we can dive deeper into that. See, is it actually really one of ours that has just kind of been muddied by other people, and how do we handle that? So that's why I love what you were saying there, because I love these interviews where we get to highlight somebody else, because I get to sit back and just learn and write and then apply it, because and I love doing the recaps. Jeremy knows this. I love doing the recaps when everything else comes out.
Right, you get to process it and then throw it back out there. You're like, I thought of something else while I was thinking. Right, yeah.
So
I mean, that's fine.
That's fine.
Yeah, I go back on I do the video cutting and the editing and taking out pieces of it, and I'm like, wow, Chelsea actually said that. Oh my gosh, wow, I go back and I'm like, that was a real golden nugget, and it just occurs after the recap when you're out of the moment for a second. It's
I was on a podcast, an educator podcast, and it's coming out on Friday, and so they sent me the clip, and they have a little image of a quote that I said, apparently, and they sent it, and I was like, that was good, that was a good one.
Right. Yeah.
Look at me. I sound so smart when people do that.
Yeah. I just wanted to highlight one thing right before we go into the next segment of this show, where so you were saying, Baruch, when you were reflecting back on your dates, and then realizing, when you met Shay, you all of a sudden realized that, hey, I didn't have to burn that list. That list still existed. And I very much, share that same sentiment, and I share that in the book as well, because right now the idea of the book, by the way, is all the lessons I learned in my dating life. My dating life was 8 years, and I met many, many people in that period of time. It was crazy. It was hell. Don't ask. But yeah, it was. Wow. Anyway, I had to really, we're going to talk about this in a moment about challenging the status quo, but it was very much that, and I was really going against the grind, and I'm using all the lessons I learned from my dating into how I'm building my business today. And I see a lot of similarities.
Yeah.
But the point I want to bring to what we were talking about, after every date, what I did was I would journal, and I would actually have an Excel sheet that I would take all the lessons I learned about myself, not about, the person I was dating, but
oh yeah,
what was my part in it? What was my responsibility? What was my part in it? Because I very much believe you have to be the kind of guy that will attract the kind of girl that I was looking for in my case. So I would really just sit down and say, this behavior came up, or that, after the journaling, I would write up like keywords, and what I learned from this kind of exercise was only strengthening my list and saying this is why I have this on my list, because it really, really talks to my values about, my purpose, who I am, everything. Right. So I just wanted to bring that up, which was very important to kind of do that self. I mean, I'm a very hands-on person, but that reflection thing.
I think that's amazing, because, I think so. Communication is what I do in so many ways. In professional development, I teach on trauma informed. That so much of that relies on communication and behavior management and strategies and blah, blah, right? But I think the best way, even with all of my knowledge on these things, the best way to show you, to remind us our, ways, our opportunities for growth, if you will, is to date somebody new.
Right.
And then you're like, oh, well, I'm not quite as good at that as I thought that I was.
Right.
It's a whole different experience.
Absolutely. It's so true. It's unbelievable. And so again, just one quick thing, this is the part of the show where we just invite all of our audiences tomorrow night, Thursday night at 7 p.m. We have a clubhouse meeting. We have a clubhouse room that is specially meant for inviting the like-minded people who are watching here, who either came from the show or are new here to the show. We want to hear your voices. We want to hear you. You guys also have valuable voices, have valuable inputs. I mean, the comments every week are always just, we have awesome audience, and we're so grateful, and it's unbelievable. They bring so much more value as well. But here's the opportunity where you could be heard. So again, we invite you all to the clubhouse meeting. So there is an invite on LinkedIn, or just follow us on our social media, and you will see that link, and that does get replayed. So if you are missing it right now, just follow us and you're going to have access to the replay. No problem. We are trying to create a safe environment for like-minded people where authentic connections are made. And something new that we just did this week was we created also a group on LinkedIn where you get to share your stuff on this group. And we are not playing the algo game, as I call it. We are real, authentic people who really, really want to celebrate and support each other. So just reach out to Baruch and I to get invited into this group. It is the Exceptional Irresistible group. So we are inviting everybody into safe environments where we can make these awesome, authentic connections and continue the conversation. So that's just the little call to action part. But the second and last part of this show is really the other element of like the unplanned, let's say, which again, it's a 2-part question. But the first part is really, if God is laughing, then, what do I need to get there in terms of like the plan, right? So we say that if man plans and God laughs, and, plan changes or whatever it is, how do I, and I think it really ties into Ghost. Ghost had his comment, like how to not, like, we can't micromanage how the universe brings things to you. So I think it really ties into that. How do we get there? I guess that's really the question, on God's plan, let's say, or on a greater power's plan.
Wow.
Cue the music.
I mean, man, this is a question right here, like the question of the ages, right? I feel like there are entire books written about this. But I think what I had to come to terms with for me in this past year, because honestly, if we're speaking about like God's plan and how you're viewing that in your life, or the universe's plan, or however you're experiencing that, I've been deconstructing a lot of the religion that I was brought up in over the past year. So this is actually a particularly interesting time to ask me this question. But I think it really comes down to, if I understand my alignment and who I am, what my values are, then I have to understand that God and the universe and all those things also understands those things. And so when I'm thinking about what I want and where I'm going, then I don't know. It used to be that I viewed it in this way, very much of that when I planned, God was laughing. But I really think that when I'm planning, it's like the creativity that this greater power put into me kind of coming out. And so not just me working against this greater power. I don't feel like planning is working against whatever this will is for you, or the fate, or whatever it is that you believe in that. But I think it's more like the creativity inside of you coming out in these plans and your alignment being, brought out of you. So
Yes.
I don't know, that's kind of how I see it. Very different of the he's laughing at me while I'm planning, but rather the universe or the greater power or whatever is watching this come out of me that is a part of who I am.
That's great. It's funny because when I was re-listening to the podcast today, I love re-listening to the podcast because you get to pick up things that you said or that Jeremy said that you didn't realize you said. It's like Elon Gold. He's a Jewish comedian. He's got this great skit about accents and how no matter what a British person says, they always sound intelligent. Like, my belly button is quite itchy. And like the Americans going, that dude's smart. So like that was my reaction to listening to the podcast. I said something and I am like, wow, that dude's really smart. But it was great because that's exactly what I was thinking is that it's not that God has this plan that we have to stick to. It's God has a plan, and that plan is for us to be successful.
Right.
He's kind of guiding us along the way, but at the end of the day, what he wants most from us, or what the universe wants most from us, I like how you use the word alignment. That's really great. Our alignment wants for us to be successful and wants for us to be happy. And so whatever we need to do, as long as we're in pursuit of that, then things are great. And it's when we fall out of alignment with ourselves and with what the universe wants or the great aligner wants, then that's when things go, that's a great aligner. I like that.
The great aligner. I wear Invisalign, so now you say it's a great aligner, and I'm seeing like this Invisalign ad.
Teeth coming out of the sky.
Coming at me. I don't know.
Moses coming down with the aligner.
It wasn't 2 tablets; it was 2 dentures.
Listen, I mean, crazier things have happened. Okay.
Right.
Yeah, we lost all year on the calendar. 2020, 2019.
I know, 2 years, man.
2 years.
And I really relate to that. And this morning I was listening to the podcast as well, just kind of like refreshing and everything. And I was really just sitting down and really meditating with it and trying to just reflect and trying to align myself with the topic. And it really, I'm going to bring up again Rick Davis's comment, question also, which is so true because it really, that alignment with the purpose. And here's what came to me when I was reflecting and when I was meditating was that I was seeing God, like I was picturing God laughing. Okay. So I was just visualizing like this great aligner, this master conductor, this great creator and this great, artist painting this picture. And if I could align myself with my purpose, and purpose is something that, we talk a lot about. This entire season is just about meaning and purpose. And that takes a lot of work. That takes a lot of intrinsic work to find your true and authentic purpose. And if I could align myself with my purpose, I believe my purpose is a divine sort of prophecy or gut feeling or gift, or call it what you will, like directly handed over to me by this master creator. And I have a chance to align myself with that purpose. Now, 2 things could happen. Either way, God is laughing because I believe God is full of positivity and he's, there's positive around it, at least the God of my understanding, the way I'd like to refer to him. So he's either laughing at like, yeah, you're going to figure this out one way or another, like you see a child, trying to figure out like biking and you see how they're like really doing everything. It's a little bit like, you're not laughing that they're hurting themselves, but it's funny how they're trying to figure it out. Like, they're cute. So that's one way, or the other one is like God is laughing because we're really figuring it out. Like we're actually accomplishing something and we're feeling good about it. And God's there celebrating with us. So that was the vision that I had today when I was, visualizing this. And I think God wants us to succeed. I really believe God sets us up to succeed. We just have to align ourselves and figure it out. And that's the journey of life. I figure, all of our life will figure this alignment stuff, which gives me the power to come to the second part of, challenging the status quo because, you know, there's no status quo when I'm visualizing this kind of approach. I know what I stand for. I know who I really am. Also, even though I'm self-discovering every day, but I know the direction that I'm going. I know this path. And as long as I align myself with that path, then I could challenge anything really. There's no such thing as a status quo in my opinion. And just curious to hear what you have to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you're talking about your purpose, I think that also goes back to what we were talking about earlier about like when you're shifting, you know, your job or your career, do you have to do it in a certain way or can you make a big jump from one thing to the other? And I think that's the same thing with your purpose, right? Your purpose, while in generalities, it could remain mostly the same, but in specifications, it's going to shift and change. And so I think a lot of times for me, I would get very stuck in like, what's my purpose? What's my purpose? What's my purpose? Am I living my purpose? Am I doing my purpose? Like this anxiety of coming over, right? But I think it's more, if I bring that in, so kind of the 4 words that would describe my purpose that I allow to be very fluid is challenge norms and empower others. And I can do that in so many different ways. And actually, I can take that purpose, put it into any situation that I'm in. And so it takes away a lot of that anxiety about what's my like huge guiding purpose and pulls it back into how am I doing my purpose right now? Like, is this conversation with you guys challenging norms and empowering others? Yeah, I think so. And so I know that I'm living in my purpose and I don't have to worry if I'm walking in my purpose tomorrow or this or that. Like, I know that I'm doing it right now. And so I think the status quo definitely needs to be challenged because it exists in a bigger sense. But I think as far as for the purpose part of all of that, I personally get way too stuck in purpose anxiety, if you will.
Yep. Oh yeah,
love it.
I think it can be a fluid thing. Like my purpose when I was teaching was to be highly impactful on those 12 kids at a time every year. My purpose now is very different, to be impactful in a different way, but it's still to be impactful. So like I got too caught in the specifications, and now I like to view it as a broader thing. Instead of like when I left the school, I really lost a lot of my identity. I mean, my identity for 16 years, I had a little badge and it would say teacher or it'd say assistant director or school director or whatever. And suddenly I had no badge. People would be like, what do you do? And I'm like, I don't know. I have no idea. And I was putting too much of, I was kind of squishing together my purpose and my like daily tasks. And I wasn't separating those out. And so I was giving all of the credit of my purpose to what I was doing at work. And anyway, it was just a huge process of kind of pulling those two things apart in my head. And so now my alignment is, am I challenging norms and empowering others? Yes, then let's go forward. No, then maybe that's not for me to do today.
Wow.
See, what you said there was exactly what I said to my counselor, which made him say, yeah, you're doing this whole thing wrong. You need to focus on yourself for a little bit. Because that's exactly what it is. It's like my purpose has become extremely stressful. Like, that's not supposed to be what it is. That's not the way it works.
Yeah. If your purpose is increasing your anxiety medication, you might need to rethink it. I'm speaking from theoretical experience. I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah, right.
I totally agree. And, you know, I'm listening to you, Chelsea, and I'm reflecting even just on myself. I worked in the prison system for 8 years. With the purpose of bringing meaning and purpose to people at their lowest level. Today, I work with the business owner and I work with the founder to bring meaning and purpose into their work environment and thus improve their business operations. Even though the purpose shifted a little bit, I think the underlying purpose remains the same, that meaning and purpose, bringing a meaningful, like a fulfilling life in a sense, right? Live life to your fullest. I'm hearing the same thing from you, and I relate to the losing a little bit your identity. Like, here I am, this guidance counselor in the prisons, and you know, like you're this hot shot, and like you walk into the prison, and even the guards want a piece of you, you know, like I get it, and then all of a sudden this gets removed, and it's like, oh my god, am I on this now? Do I have to compete with like Tony Robbins or somebody like that? Like, you know, like all of a sudden there's this element, you know, and then it just really takes time to just reflect and say, you know what, I'm the same person, whether I'm in the prisons or whether I'm in, you know, wherever. My job is really to help people live a fulfilling life, and that's it. That's my purpose, you know. That's just how I relate to your share. So
yeah, and I think it can be very dangerous. At the very beginning, we talked about like, what would you say to the kids that are going to be adults later? It can be very dangerous to tie your purpose to a profession. So I hear a lot of young adults now saying, "Hey, my purpose is to be a teacher," and I'm like, like, what is your purpose? And it's kind of the same list to feeling concept. Like if you were to take that, your purpose is to empower others. Take away that like very that title that's going to hold you back, I feel like, because what does that even look like in 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, whatever, right? So I think it's very dangerous, but very common to say, my purpose is to be a teacher. My purpose is to be a this. My purpose is to be a that.
I love it.
And can definitely get you in trouble, speaking from experience.
Yeah. So that's bringing us to the top of the hour. I see that, you know, even though we call these shows for like 40 to 45 minutes, we're always over time. So again, guys, we do apologize for that overtime. And as I always do, whenever we do go overtime, I do offer a gift to whoever has stayed to the end. Just please follow this email right here, exceptionallyirresistible@gmail.com. I will send you a link to download for mental real estate. It's an exercise that helps you pretty much connect with the right people in your life, and who are people that deserve more time, who are people who deserve less time. It is one of my most popular exercises that I developed. I usually charge quite a bit for it. It's part of a bigger program, but as I say, I always give that as a gift if we do go over time.
I'm here at the end. Do I get it too?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Just I follow the emails. So whoever emails, even if this is a replay or whatever, whoever emails will get that link 100%. And Baruch, I'm going to leave it up to you to wrap up the show, and then let's wrap it up.
And it's that exercise, which I got a sneak peek of, #business partner. It's really cool because it really relates to this idea of bridges, like you were talking about, Chelsea, and how the bridges are also those people that we're connected to. So this is a great exercise to do that. Again, I want to thank everybody. First of all, I want to thank you, Chelsea, for being here for us, for sharing with our audience, sharing with our guests. You're our guest. This is the part of the show where I start to lose it, and I'm just like channeling that. Why not? What could go wrong?
What could go wrong?
Last
Just go
time I
with
was
it.
talking about chicken nuggets and bobbleheads. I lost screen. Okay. Anyway, I want to thank you for being here. I also want to thank all of our guests and our audience I did it again. All of our audience members for joining us tonight. As Jeremy mentioned, and as it's scrolling on the bottom, join us in our clubhouse tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Or Eastern Daylight Time, whichever one it is, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, for a chance to share your thoughts. We would love to hear from you. I'm going to stop talking and just turn it over to Chelsea. Chelsea, if you want to wrap up by sharing how people can reach out to you, get in touch with you, find out more about you, I'm done.
Oh boy. Okay, you can find me on LinkedIn, Instagram. What's the other one? LinkedIn, Instagram. That's it. That's pretty much it. TikTok. Yeah, I mean, I'm around. You can find me. Someone somewhere will direct you.
Yeah, in the recap, we'll also add all your links and how to reach you and everything. So absolutely. Yes, for sure.
Awesome.
All righty.
Thank
Okay,
you
guys.
all. Have a wonderful night.
See you soon, everybody.